Hello, BookTube. Well, to commemorate this channel hitting a mind-boggling 4,000 subscribers, I sort of punted the question to the rest of you whether or not you want to do yet another Q&A, because I've done that on many milestones before. And I thought maybe there's a chance that you're all getting sick of hearing about me. And then I posted the video. And a few days later, somebody mentioned to me that it was garnering questions. And then just today, I went and looked at it myself, and there's an enormous number of questions, more than we can do in one video. And I thought, well, should I group them by heading or something like that? And then I thought the way we'll do it is to let the length of the video decide how much we get through in one shot. I'm going to need more than one video to get through these things, because you don't want bullet answers. You didn't ask them for bullet answers. You want me to talk about them. So I'm going to start with at the top of the list of questions, and we'll just see how far we get before I cut this off and make a part 2, and maybe a part 3. Who knows? So we'll start right away with Orthia NZ, who asks, do you think the art of critical reading is dying? If so, do you have tips on how to start reading critically? What helped you? And secondary, what are the key elements that makes a good book versus a bad book? Okay, what makes a good book versus a bad book is obviously a whole video or series of videos on its own. Although my short answer is the non-fussy conviction of the author. If the author is swanning, if they're saying, you know, look at me, Ma, I'm writing, if they're throat clearing, trying to impress me with their credentials but not really telling me anything, that's a bad book. Books, the conviction of the author is what is the dividing line that I look at first. But in answer to your other questions, do I think that critical reading is dying? No, I don't. And a way to start critical reading is to realize that you don't need any special tools. If you've been reading your whole life, you already have the only tool you need. The key to reading critically, at least to start with, is to realize how many books like the one you're reading now you've already read. That counts as experience. And yet so many readers are so used to looking at reading as a kind of a formless pleasure that they don't think of it that way. It's like if you had an office statistician who went into every single new job not remembering the old ones. That's not how it works. If you read a new novel, a contemporary fiction, about a young married couple who has a child who's giving them a problem of some kind, whether it's behavioral, psychological, mortal illness, school, bullying, anything like that, you have already read many novels that fit that broad description. The key to reading critically, at least at the very beginning, is to use those novels to read this new one. So that if you go into a book like that and you're dragging a little, don't say, if you've read many novels like that along those same templates, and you read a new one along that template and it's dragging a little, don't say, oh, this really isn't working for me. Instead, say, this isn't really working. And here's why. And the reason I know why is because I have a lot of experience reading this kind of thing. That counts as experience. And that's the beginning of critical reading, is to assess what you already know and then test it. Anyway, question number 2, Paperback Junkie, says, what was the first book you read that made you feel dirty? I realize there's only so much you can know about a person through the keyhole of BookTube videos, but do I strike you as someone with a high quotient for shame? I was raised and socialized by a species that licks its own hoo-ha in broad daylight in front of each other and God, mother, and country, and who does it sometimes for an hour at a stretch. No book has ever made me feel dirty. Let's see here. Leslie Ann Shippert says, I'm new to BookTube. Oh, welcome to BookTube. Mind the cesspits. Mind the acid baths. And would be happy to listen to your answers on any of the questions posed. Oh, thank you. We'll see if that ends up being true. Math 3W2012, no name. Congratulations on 4,000 subscribers. Let's see here. I have 3 questions. I'm trying to get the Lenovo Yoga book to behave here. Do you think literary fiction publishers need to look beyond the university writing programs for new talent? Yes, I do. And when they look beyond university writing programs for new talent, it would be nice. It's not going to happen anytime soon, but it would be nice if they looked at some of the world's 217 countries that aren't Nigeria. Question number 2. Do you ever get the feeling that some particularly YA writers watch film and TV but don't read? It's not just that I get that feeling. I watch their interviews. They don't read at all. But I get the drift of your question, because you would easily get that impression by reading their books. You can tell right away. The book is entirely formed by cinema. And not just cinema, but modern cinema. I've noticed that even people in the 21st century, even people who call themselves dyed-in-the-wool film fans, not only don't know any movies prior to Goodfellas, but didn't know until you proved it to them that movies had even been made before Goodfellas. Goodfellas was the first. Thomas Edison made it in his laboratory. And everything after that, sure. Anything before that, I have no idea at all. Don't know anything about it at all. Never even heard some of the directors' names. Don't know any of the stars. Don't know any of the ground that was broken. So it's not just that you can tell from their books and their interviews that they're entirely shaped by movies and TV. It's that they're entirely shaped by literally the tip of the iceberg of movies and TV. It makes for a very poor, poverty-stricken fictional landscape. So I have noticed that, yes. And also, with YAs, with anything else, you can tell a mile away when an author has been steeped in other authors. It used to be hard to spot because they all were. Now you can spot it a mile away. I'm not sure that authors realize how visible it is. And question number 3. Given your range of superpowers, do you remember ever being exposed to irradiated books or toxic ink when you were a puppy? No. I don't have a freakish Stan Lee origin story, I'm afraid. And keep in mind, the irradiated book or toxic ink would imply that I've been with books all along, and I haven't been. When I was a puppy with other puppies. We didn't think. We certainly didn't read. We had a ball. Those things weren't on the radar. Ilona J. Says, I know that you focus on reading new American releases, but do you still read or own any non-English language books? Since you know so many languages, it's a shame we never hear about them or see them in your bookshelf tours. Also, who, other than you, of course, is the best literary critic still working today? No, I don't. Now that I think about it, I don't think that I have a handful of non-English language books in my possession. I don't think one has turned up on a library tour. I have some of them, certainly, though. I do occasionally. I patrol the book catalogs and Amazon for all the countries and languages that I speak. Usually with a great deal of self-control, because my year-end list of best and worst books is already enormous. The last thing I need to do is add untranslated works to it. It's only once in a while that I will break down if I see a 1,000-page new biography of something that I have to have that isn't translated and isn't going to be anytime soon. Then I tend to grab it. And who, other than you, of course, is the best literary critic still working today? Well, 2 things. One, it's a fairly long list. Michael Derrida, James Wood, Christine Smallwood for Harper's, Adam Morris-Jones, who's in the London Review and the TLS all the time, who's absolutely excellent. Whole bunch of other people. Even, what's his name from the Wall Street Journal? Sam Sachs? There's a whole bunch, and more all the time. I see new names in literary reviews all the time, people I don't know who do a fantastic job. But I also want to point out, just to let slip by here, I know I joke all the time on this channel, and I'm very, very merry in my egomania, but I want to point out, I do not consider myself a great literary critic at all. I am a watchdog. I know perfectly well the size and the relatively low ambition of my patch, and I defend it. I have been honored in my life to know great book reviewers, and I know some now. The old tagline, some of my best friends are. But I have never claimed in earnest that I'm one of them. I am certainly not. I am an Old Bailey hack. I am ready to latch onto a new book, and if somebody commissions me to review it, if I feel like doing it myself, I will put a harness on that book and briskly trot it around the park. And I'll get off a few good one-liners if I'm in the mood. I'll make a few good points about it, I hope, and that'll be that. I am not a deep diver. I am not a profound thinker. My main focus, unlike a lot of the great critics that I just mentioned, a lot more that I could mention that aren't alive anymore, my main focus is you. My main focus is the customer. My main focus is, if you see this book, if you pick up this book in a bookstore, is it worth you spending your money to buy it? And if you borrow it from the library, is it worth spending your time to read it? What are you going to get, and what aren't you going to get? What's done well and what's not? The art of telling you that, practical stuff, and the reactions of a fairly experienced reader to determine whether or not you want to invest in this book, whether it be money and time or just time. That's my goal. That's my sole goal. I am not interested in speaking from Parnassus. I am not capable of making pronouncements that are going to last 150 years. I'm not able to do it, and I don't want to. I'm a far more humble critic than that. It's one of the only times you'll ever hear the word humble associated with me. But anyway, let's move on here. Parlabane is back. Is back. Parlabane is back. Thanks for all your fascinating videos. Not sure all of them have been fascinating. In fact, one of the enduring mysteries of this channel is that I'm pretty sure most of them haven't been fascinating. You mentioned that you're a fast reader. As a slow reader, I've long been curious about how speedy readers experience their books. Do you savor the words you're whizzing through? Also, I often need to find particular rhythm to get into a book. Does that also apply to fast readers, but at a different tempo? It certainly doesn't apply to me. I don't deal with anything as falderall as rhythm. I will notice it, of course, but I've got books to read. Lots of them. I want to make a good dent in the new releases of an entire year in an entire language. So I do savor, absolutely, but not indulgently so. And I am aware of rhythms that an author is writing. Of course, I have to be, because the rhythm is one of the things I might need to report on to my readers. But I myself think that when it comes to rhythm and savoring, some readers take that a little too far. They get a little Hannibal Lecter on it. Oh, Proust. I don't do anything like that, and I don't think anyone else should either. I am aware, perhaps to too great an extent, of the circumstances under which a lot of these books are written. So when I juxtapose those circumstances against a reader decades or centuries later holding it up and going, oh, Balzac, I can't help but chuckle. Anyway, so the experience is different. For me, I think the closest I would come to what I think you're getting at would be rereading. And I've mentioned on this channel many times before that when it comes to new releases, I will reread. Just especially the closer I get to a review, to make sure that I've got the material. Although it doesn't always need, it's not always necessary, but I try to do it, especially if there's a lot to the book. Let's see here. Pete says, I think I remember you mentioning how capable the Jesuits are at molding and building sharp minds and brains. There's nobody better. Period. And how your mentor helped you with this. Do you think some kind of mentorship or guidance is necessary for developing new mental capacities? And what are your thoughts on neuroplasticity and the best methods for building the brain you want? Memory capacity and organization, analytical thinking, making the links between ideas, creativity, etc. Not necessary. A mentor and guidance is not necessary. And I say that so strongly because there's no kind of thinker out there that I admire more than autodidacts. And they prove that mentorship and guidance are not necessary. You can get brilliant without it. It's great if you have something like that. If it's offered, you should take it. But as far as my thoughts on neuroplasticity and the best methods for building the brain you want, my My answer, I've given it on this channel a few times, and I've given it in person. I can't count how many times, and it always disappoints people because it's so humdrum. But my answer is practice. Sorry, my answer is practice. All the things you mentioned: memory capacity, organization, analytical thinking, making links between ideas, even creativity. It's practice. The more you do those things, the better you will get at them. You have to do an enormous amount of them to get good at any of them. And once you've done that enormous amount, the more you do, the better you get. If you rest, you will worsen. If you think doing a little will get you there, you're wrong. It takes an enormous amount of practice. It's a muscle. The one between your ears is no different than the one on your arm or on your leg. The more you work it, the better shape it will be in. The more it will require. And that's just the truth of it. I've been around creative people and geniuses and hard workers and the whole gamut, and I've been around them for a long, long time, and I'm telling you, that is the answer. Practice. You want to get good at any of those things. Practice. You expressed your thoughts on meditation with some hot spice in a recent video. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I hate the idea. I don't know why it's so... Oh, my God. I actually was going to say I don't know why it's so popular, but I do know why it's so popular. Because whiny millennials in the 21st century will feel sorry for themselves about anything. The idea that you would sit on a mat and intentionally try to empty your own head... I actually sat in on a yoga class once where the instructor said, imagine that you're not thinking or feeling anything. Imagine that you are dead, lying peacefully. No thanks. You're going to be dead mighty soon enough. No thanks. I want as much stimulation as possible. Thanks. And if you're saying, well, the reason I meditate is because sometimes the stimulation just gets too much. It's too much to sort out. It's all this racket in my brain. You know what I say to that? Grow up. Control yourself. It's not too much. Oh my God, it's not too much. You're not dodging mortars on the Somme. All the stimulation in the world, thank you very much. In no time at all, we're all going to be gone. Anyway, let's move on. Jamie Granith. How are we doing for time? Oh, God, we're getting up there. Oh, all right. Well, Jamie Granith says, I bought Robert Dallek's Kennedy biography from a secondhand bookshop. I was wondering if it's a good starting point for JFK biographies. It'll do just fine. Sure. There are so many of them, and it's hard to know which to read. True. But the key with a subject like JFK or something big like that is that you shouldn't ration yourself. The key to getting a bigger picture and figuring out which one you like the most is to read a lot of them. Not to pick one and read that. I find it interesting hearing your opinion on writers who rarely or haven't mentioned. What do you think of Philip K. Dick, John Wyndham, or George Orwell? Lastly, Dune and The Lathe of Heaven are surprisingly low on your 2014 readership, Steve Reed's top 50 science fiction and fantasy list. Is it a collaborated list? Nothing on Steve Reed's is collaborated. Nothing I will ever write again in my life will be collaborated. I thought that Dune would be just behind Lord of the Rings for you. Well, on most of the lists that I make, I'm not completely calling up the 2014 list that you mentioned, but on most of the lists that I make, the only enumerated spot is the number one spot. The rest aren't sorted in rising or falling favor usually. But in terms of the authors that you mentioned, Philip K. Dick is junk. He wrote nothing that was any good at all. John Wyndham he wrote some good. He was a good prose stylist, but he bugs me because he was the forerunner of a whole group of people, Margaret Atwood, who sort of dabble in science fiction and fantasy and don't take it seriously, and that really bothers me. It's a genre on its own. It's not your summer vacation. And George Orwell, I confess, his fiction has always seemed to me to be barely disguised nonfiction, barely disguised conversation. But oh my God, I love his nonfiction. His I think it's Everyman Library did a big fat 1-volume collected essays of Orwell. It's a thing to have. If you ever see it used, it is a thing to have. Brilliance on every page. So I have a sort of an uneven reaction to him. Next one is from Britta Baylor? Britta Bowler? Uh, Congrats on 4K. Fantastic. I still have questions, of course. Not self-serving at all. How do you go about reviewing a book? Oh, for God's sake, Britta. Well, I don't know. Do we have 2 hours for a video? How do you go about reviewing a book? What's the meaning of life? Name some book reviewers that you think are good, preferably ones that are still alive, and why? Well, I named some in this video, some of the bigger names. And the reason that they're good is because they take it seriously. They're not just. I read lots of book reviewers who don't do it right, and I guess that tends. How do you go about reviewing a book? That's an enormous question that I should make a video or a series of videos about. But how do I do it? Well, first of all, I take a sort of a fingerprint of the book itself. So we have an example here, this thing, The Daisy Children. I don't know the author. So that's the first question. Do I know the author? Have read anything else by them? I don't know anything about the book other than the cover copy. Don't know the first thing about it at all. Then I ask, do I know anything about the premise or subject matter of the book? And I know about the New London. This book deals with the New London school explosion of 1937. I do know a little about that. And one of the characters moves from Boston, which I know a lot about, to Texas, which I know a lot about. So you sort of get a feel, a depth charge feel for how known to you the book is, just in general terms, and whether or not the author is known to you. And then once I'm done with both of those, I just dig in. Once I'm done with both of those, I shut off anything else, any other theorizing, and just dive in. I clear space, like I've got this big auditorium, and I clear out all the chairs except for me and the author, and then I'm with them, and all the way along. And then once I start on page 1, then it's sort of like the author and I are playing catch, and we see how long that can go. And as the book goes on and gets more complex and more voices are involved, the tosses get more and more complex, a little higher, maybe a little underhand, doop-de-doo, that sort of thing. And I have to catch these things, and the author has to catch mine, and has to execute their throws correctly. So it gets more and more and more complex, and the whole process from page 1 is just seeing how long the author will go before they literally drop the ball. So it's a waiting game. I usually don't have to wait long. And then the pattern of mistakes, the pattern of failure, becomes in its own way instructive. Where have you seen this pattern of failure before? What is causing this? That sort of thing. And oh my God, this is too long already. Here, we'll do one more and then we'll come back. So the next one is Patrick Kenny. When you read children's books aloud to kids, do you do the different voices of the characters, or do you read it straight? I do the different voices. I don't read it straight, of course. I do the different voices, but I should add, just a point of clarification, that's true when I read books to anybody, not just to kids. I don't drive. I don't know how to drive a car. I've never sat behind the wheel of a car in my life. So in my life, I have spent endless hours of time as a passenger in cars with friends driving, sometimes short distances and sometimes very, very long distances. And when I've done that, my coin of passage has always been, I'll pay for gas and I'll also read to you while we're driving. And many times, it happened that whether it was a long trip or a short trip, I would be reading for a long time, and then I would suddenly start to see landmarks passing a second or a third time. And I would say, "What's the matter? Are you lost?" And I would have the driver, whether it was an old Boston Brahmin woman or a football player for the University of Texas, I would have the driver say, "No, we've been at our destination for a little while. I just wanted you to keep reading." So I guess I do a pretty good job of it. But the answer to your question is, when I'm reading books to kids, I do all the voices, and we have a ball. And that's it. I'm gonna wrap up this batch of questions for now. So we'll finish there, and we will start the next batch of questions with number 1, Dee Dee at Brown Girl Reading. So there you go. Thank you for the patience, BookTube. I'll be back soon.